Lawmakers are asking a lot of questions on Capitol Hill today, and some of those center around the release of the Epstein files. And I want to tell you where we stand with this situation, because lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have had questions about how the Department of Justice has released the Epstein files. An administration official actually testified on Capitol Hill about why he's mentioned in these documents, and that would be Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick. He defended himself in a Senate hearing yesterday where he downplayed his ties to Jeffrey Epstein after a revelation showed there in the files that he had had at least 2 meetings with him after Epstein's 2008 conviction on prostitution charges. And Lutnick had said in that hearing that they had lunch on the island, and for about an hour that was true. But his testimony comes a day after Epstein's associate, Ghislaine Maxwell.
Okay, so Pam Bondi just faced a devastating court decision that might terminate her time as Attorney General. A federal judge just issued an explosive ruling that basically states Bondi has been operating the Department of Justice like a private law firm for Donald Trump, violating federal statutes, undermining congressional authority, and misusing her position in ways that the court deems completely unacceptable.
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No,
Your
you're going to answer the
theatrics are
question the way I
ridiculous.
asked it.
Chairman Jordan, I'm not going to get in the gutter with these people, but I'm going to answer the question.
How many have you indicted?
Again, the time belongs to
Reclaiming my time.
The time belongs.
I think it's very interesting.
Reclaiming my time.
I think it's very interesting.
You can
that
reclaim
he
your
talks
time,
about
but
they
reclaiming my time,
indicted.
Mr.
The
Chairman.
president said they
Close the
indicted
clock.
him
Mr.
twice.
Mr. Chairman, please
They
stop the
sure
clock
did.
and stop the
they
clock and
indicted.
restore his time.
Okay, here we go with these
Committee will be in order.
theatrics.
The time belongs to the gentleman
back
from
the
New
clock,
York.
please.
We will give you a few more seconds. We will do that. But when
Reclaiming
you ask
my-
a question, the witness
question
gets to
was-
answer. You may not like the answer, but she
Right.
gets to
The
answer.
question was, how many of Epstein's...
They don't like
What?
the answer,
Reclaiming
Chairman,
my time.
because it's honest.
Reclaiming
So
my-
he asked a
Reclaiming my
4-minute
time.
question.
Restore 45
and
seconds to
I am
Mr. Nadler,
going
please,
to
Mr. Chairman.
Answer.
And the decision is so catastrophic that it's immediately sparking demands for her instant resignation. Here's the breakdown. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, a federal judge in Washington, D.C., delivered a ruling that demolishes Bondi's legal defenses in a case concerning the disclosure of classified materials. The situation is complex, but the fundamental problem is straightforward. Bondi's DOJ has been blocking the release of records that Congress lawfully requested, invoking executive privilege and internal deliberation safeguards. But Judge Jackson wasn't convinced. She examined the records privately. She analyzed them against what Bondi was asserting, and she determined that Bondi was weaponizing privilege protections to conceal evidence that should be accessible. The judge's wording is scathing. She stated that Bondi's DOJ has demonstrated a pattern of behavior that undermines the assumption of governmental integrity.
They don't like the answer, Chairman. You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything,
did tell you because we
washed
saw
up
what you did in the
loser
Senate.
Lawyer, not even a lawyer. They sure did. They tried to impeach him twice, and you, Mr. Nadler, were one of the leads on the impeachment. I was on the other side. I lived that with you. Have you apologized to President Trump?
She announced the department's contentions are not simply erroneous, they're dishonest. And she instructed Bondi to produce the files right away with no further extensions. But here's the factor that's actually driving Bondi insane. Judge Jackson didn't merely rule on the files. She also incorporated language in her verdict that directly challenges Bondi's competence to function. The judge remarked that Bondi has repeatedly made declarations to courts that turned out to be fabricated, that she's refused judicial requirements, that she's viewed court decisions as voluntary, and the judge suggested that this pattern of violation raises critical questions about whether Bondi should continue as Attorney General. She didn't explicitly advocate Bondi's resignation, but she compiled a factual dossier that makes resignation seem unavoidable. And now Congress is exploiting this. Multiple representatives are citing Judge Jackson's verdict as confirmation that Bondi is unqualified for office. They're stressing the judge's findings that Bondi manipulated courts, ignored commands, and weaponized privilege defenses. And they're proclaiming this is precisely the kind of violation that merits impeachment or removal.
First, he brought up the president saying they indicted me twice. They sure did. They tried to impeach him twice. And you, Mr. Nadler, were one of the leads on the impeachment. I was on the other side. I lived that with you. During impeachment, you said the president conspired, sought foreign interference in the 2016 election. Robert Mueller found no evidence, none, of foreign interference in 2016. Have you apologized to President Trump? Have you apologized to President Trump, all of you who participated in those impeachment hearings against Donald Trump? You all should be apologizing. You sit here and you attack the president, and I am not going to have it. I'm not going to put up with it. You know, all they want to do, all the American people need to know this. They are talking about Epstein today. This has been around since the Obama administration. This administration released over 3 million pages of documents, over 3 million, and Donald Trump signed that law to release all of those documents. He is the most transparent president in the nation's history. And none of them ask Merrick Garland over the last 4 years one word about Jeffrey Epstein. How ironic is that? You know why? Because Donald Trump, the Dow right now is over.
The situation centered on materials that Congress had demanded from the DOJ concerning active inquiries. Bondi's office invoked executive privilege and internal process safeguards to rationalize blocking them. Typical procedure, correct? Except Judge Jackson examined the materials in camera, meaning she assessed them privately to verify Bondi's assertions. And what she discovered was that Bondi's privilege arguments were essentially fabricated. The materials weren't confidential internal discussions. They were standard correspondences that should have been disclosed weeks earlier. The judge determined that Bondi's DOJ had been exploiting privilege arguments as a stalling mechanism, not a valid legal strategy. Then the judge pushed deeper. She observed that this wasn't a singular occurrence. She referenced numerous instances where Bondi's DOJ had made statements to courts that became proven inaccurate or deceptive. She identified cases where the department had disregarded judicial directives or postponed compliance indefinitely. And she determined that this pattern of behavior obliterates the presumption of government integrity that courts typically extend to federal entities. That's a crushing determination. Courts generally presume that government attorneys are operating truthfully. They grant DOJ credibility because prosecutors are expected to be faithful servants of justice. But Judge Jackson is declaring Bondi's DOJ has forfeited that presumption. They've fabricated so repeatedly that courts cannot rely on them anymore. And here's where this relates to Bondi's dismissal. When a federal judge declares an agency has eliminated the presumption of integrity, that's not merely a legal rebuke. That's an official determination of malfeasance. It enters the permanent record. It transforms into evidence that can be utilized in subsequent proceedings, and Congress can leverage it to warrant impeachment or termination. Because if the Attorney General cannot be trusted by federal tribunals, she shouldn't be controlling the Department of Justice. The political consequences are already unfolding. Democrats in the House are utilizing Judge Jackson's decision to revitalize demands for Bondi's impeachment. They're asserting, look, a federal judge has determined that Bondi deceived courts and exploited her authority. That's an impeachable violation. We must respond. And even certain Republicans are growing apprehensive. They don't want to be championing an attorney general who's been openly condemned by a federal judge for duplicity. Bondi's reaction thus far has been combative. She's alleging that Judge Jackson is prejudiced, that the decision is politically orchestrated, that it's simply another instance of activist judges targeting the Trump administration. But that defense collapses when the judge's conclusions are grounded in actual material she examined in chambers. It's difficult to allege bias when the judge analyzed the evidence and concluded Bondi was mistaken. And there's another dimension here that makes this even more catastrophic for Bondi. Judge Jackson's decision is accessible. It's comprehensive. It documents specific occasions where Bondi's DOJ misrepresented courts. That means every subsequent judge who processes a case involving Bondi's DOJ is going to encounter this decision. They're going to recognize that a federal judge found this department unreliable, and that's going to render Bondi's position untenable because judges will scrutinize every assertion she produces. They'll require additional verification. They'll be less inclined to approve her motions. She's going to be confronting resistance in every tribunal in the nation because one judge already stated she cannot be trusted. So let's analyze what this decision actually signifies for Bondi's trajectory. First, it's another colossal strike against her reputation. She was already under criticism for the Epstein documents concealment. She was already confronting contempt warnings from Congress. Now, a federal judge has contributed her own conclusion that Bondi's DOJ participates in deceptive behavior. That's 3 distinct areas where Bondi's truthfulness is being challenged. And when your truthfulness is challenged as Attorney General, you cannot execute your responsibilities. Prosecutors require credibility. Courts must trust them. Juries must accept them. If Bondi has squandered that trust, she's fundamentally ineffective as AG. Second, the decision reinforces the justification for impeachment. Before Judge Jackson's determination, impeachment proponents had to depend on political rhetoric and broad allegations. Now they possess a judicial conclusion. They have a federal judge declaring Bondi's behavior obliterates the presumption of government integrity. That's compelling evidence. It's challenging for Bondi's supporters to characterize a federal judge's formal decision as merely politics. Third, the decision establishes legal vulnerability for Bondi individually. If she's been generating false statements to courts, that could constitute a violation. False declarations to federal judges can result in penalties, contempt rulings, even criminal prosecution. Judge Jackson didn't proceed that far in this decision, but she established the foundation for others to do so. Bondi could confront professional sanctions, monetary penalties, or worse if prosecutors choose to investigate the pattern of behavior the judge documented. Fourth, the decision harms the entire Trump administration. Bondi is Trump's attorney general. She's intended to be his primary law enforcement official. If she's perceived as dishonest and unreliable, that implicates Trump. It makes the whole administration appear compromised and anarchic, and that's going to be a significant problem in the 2026 midterms because voters don't want an administration that federal judges declare cannot be trusted. Fifth, the decision strengthens congressional supervision. Congress has been battling with Bondi for months over materials and testimony. Bondi's been obstructing, asserting privilege, postponing cooperation. But Judge Jackson just determined that Bondi's privilege assertions are frequently illegitimate. That gives Congress leverage to require even more materials and to hold Bondi in contempt when she declines. The decision undermines Bondi's entire legal approach for evading oversight. And here's the genuinely alarming aspect for Bondi. Judge Jackson isn't isolated. Other federal judges have also reproached Bondi's DOJ for misleading behavior. Judge Paul Friedman declared Bondi's department eliminated the presumption of government integrity. Other judges have delivered severe criticisms. So this isn't one maverick judge with an objective. This is a pattern spanning multiple tribunals. Multiple judges are stating the identical thing. Bondi's DOJ cannot be trusted. And when you have that many judges arriving at that assessment, it's not a fluke. It's a crisis. So where does this position Bondi? She's confronting contempt from Congress, impeachment dangers, a federal judge labeling her dishonest, and an expanding number of courts that don't trust her. She's in an impossible situation because every day she remains in office, more harm accumulates, more decisions emerge, more evidence of misconduct surfaces, and eventually even her advocates in the White House might conclude she's too much of a burden. Trump might retain her because she's faithful, but loyalty only extends so far when you're undermining the entire administration. If Bondi becomes a representation of corruption and dishonesty, Trump might determine she's not worth the political expense. And if Trump abandons her, she's got nowhere to turn. No party backing, no judicial credibility, no political prospects. She's finished. The nightmare decision from Judge Jackson might be the commencement of the conclusion for Pam Bondi. It's a judicial determination that she's untrustworthy, that she exploits authority, that she deceives courts, and those determinations are going to accompany her everywhere. In every legal proceeding, every congressional hearing, every public declaration, people are going to reference Judge Jackson's decision and state, "This is who Pam Bondi is." A federal judge declared so, and that's a reputation you cannot rehabilitate.